Previously on ARP. Because one of the things that you have to understand about being impressive, either you are or you're not. Mm-hmm. You don't have to try to be impressive. And particularly when dealing with someone direct as I am, a yes or no answer goes a long way for me.
Yep.
There are things that Theo has been able to tell me, no, Plush, you can't do that. Now, of course, I'm going to ask why, and he's just going to come back, no, it's not possible. Move on. Next. And certainly, I might even go pout. But here's the harsh reality. I'm either going to pout or I'm going to help solution to say, hey, Theo, this is how we can do it. Or, God forbid that the great Aaron R. Plush has to accept a no. Whoa. It's okay. Like, so the answer to some things straight up is just no. And you have to be okay with the no. Realness. All right, Fanny, you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Theo, you there?
I'm here.
We're introducing authentic realness. Hello, everyone. We're back. Yet another episode of my Authentic Realness podcast. Realness. And as I've said in several other episodes, I am enjoying the journey. It is been one where many of the topics that I talk to friends about, that I talk to my corporate professional colleagues in those circles, I'm getting an opportunity to have a platform. One of the things that we were laughing about as we were leading into tonight's episode is that these podcasts and platforms and social media provides an opportunity for people who likely should not have platforms to reach millions of people to have them. And the funny part about that is that, unfortunately, that's where we are. And I don't want to be one of those people. I want to make sure that what I am presenting is meaningful, is factual, and is information that people are able to build and grow from, and that it's not a nuisance to anyone. And with that, we're going to try this new format where I'm not going to do my dissertation or soliloquy. We're just going to jump right in. And tonight's topic is a topic of where I started this as a post on LinkedIn. And in the post, I talked about once I decide it is done. And where that came from is I had a situation in one of the projects that I'm working on. And it was really more of a reinforcement mindset back to myself that once I decided I'm going to do something, it's done. I don't need anyone doing a whole bunch of following up, checking in. Hey, Plush. Hey, Aaron. How are you doing? How's it coming along? Once I decide, it's done. Now, conversely, if I don't decide, it's not done. And what we're going to talk about tonight is definitiveness. And how does that apply across the board? So I do have Fabi and Theo with me tonight, as I always do. And certainly going to ask both of them to just jump right in on their thoughts on being definitive and definitiveness. So the floor is open.
I'll always say ladies first. So Fabi, it's on you.
Thanks, Theo. So I know a little bit in talking about this earlier. For me, sometimes I'm not as definitive just due to a lack of confidence in certain areas. Of course, not in all areas and all aspects of my life, but when it comes to making certain decisions, I'm 100%. I know exactly what I want. No one can steer me wrong. But then there's others that I'm like, well, should I do this or should I do that? Or I'll ask others for their opinion. So something that's helped me is, especially if I'm asking my sister, because she's the one who always gets the wrath of me being indecisive is holding me accountable. And that has extremely helped, because it's to the point now where I'm like, I don't even want to go to her because I know she's going to say, make the decision yourself. So, but in a good way, she wants to empower me like that, just because that's something that I've struggled with in the past. So for me now, I do feel more confident in certain decisions that I make because of that, because I had her to hold me accountable, and I had her to tell me, like, you can make this decision for yourself. So I would say that's my piece on it. I'm sure I'll jump in a little bit more as we have this discussion further.
Where do you think that comes from, though, Fabi? Like, what do you think is, for you or people that you know, from a core perspective, what are some of those things that separate folks who are definitive and definite and this is what it is versus those who may be a little more, I'm uncertain, not really sure, or even the, I don't care, folks? Either way, we're going to dinner and I don't care. Wherever you want to go, we'll go there. What do you think some of those core differences are as to personality types, essence of who the person is? What really defines that? And you alluded to confidence as being one thing. What are some of those other things?
That's a really great question. So aside from confidence, I would say people who are not definitive, maybe they're just, I mean, to me, it stems from insecurity, but not necessarily as big as that word. That might be like too big of a word for that, but it could be someone who's just doesn't care, or they're maybe insecure about their decisions as to how it will impact others. Maybe, I don't want to say this because then this person will think that.
That's a good one.
I know that's how I am sometimes. Like, I don't know if I should say this because what is this person going to think? It's the opinion of others when it comes to me personally.
That's real good.
And that affects the decisions that I make. And I have learned, or am still in the process of learning, to not value what other people say, because at the end of the day, it's my decision and it impacts me, not others.
Interesting.
Yeah, like for me, just piggybacking off what Fabi just stated, that's one of the things that has plagued me in regards to not being able to give definitive answers when it came to certain questions that may have come my way, because I don't want to say I don't know based on the things that I've went through in my past or went through throughout my life. You know, when you are tasked and somebody asks you a question, you say, I don't know. I've been in situations where they look at you as less than in a corporate sense. Like, why don't you know? You got your degree, you got this, but who walks around and knows everything?
Right.
But it's like a level of getting to the point where you can say, I don't know, but I'll find out. And being definite in that and be like, I don't know at this moment, but give me a second, I'll get the answer for you.
And doing that follow-up is the key part.
That's the very important part, which is where I am now. But there was a time where I would just say, I don't know, and just leave it at that, because I was insecure. If they ask more questions, they're going to really see, oh, you lack knowledge in this area. Let me play on that. So, yeah, the confidence, I can definitely agree with that. That was a very powerful point. But I honestly feel like when it comes to a lot of people, it comes down to how you're wired and what you've endured. It's a lot of variables that are involved when it comes to being a person that has the mindset of this is definite. This is it is what it is. And that's what it is. Take it or leave it.
Yeah, I tell you both in regard to being definite and being definitive, and to the listeners as well. You all know we do our lead in to this conversation. And one of the things that I was really transparent with both Fabi and Theo was that for me, I don't recall a phase of my life where I've not been definitive. That as long as I can remember myself, I've been a very definite being. Many people might even call it a stubborn being. Some folks maybe you can't tell them anything type being. Yet, I can tell you that when I decide anything, here what it is, it could be something big or small. I had a situation where I'd made a decision the other night as to where I was like, no, I'm not going there. I was like, okay, well, I'm going there.
That
Well,
Plush, you went out, bro.
You go there, and I'm gonna go here, and that's gonna be the end of that.
Mm-hmm.
And it was all good. What did you say, Theo?
I was asking you to repeat that because you went out.
Oh, I was saying, did my alarm make me go out? The whole concept was, I live by alarms.
Realness.
Listeners, just so you all know. So ultimately, I love Stash, which is one of the many platforms that I use from an investing perspective. And they have this party where you can get free stock. And in turn, that's the alarm that just went off. So I need to make sure within the next hour, I'm able to go and get this free stock. So plug for Stash. In that, the point that I was making, Theo, before you so rudely interrupted my train of thought.
Say what?
Was that as long as I've known myself, I'm very definitive. And in that definitive nature, I had a situation where someone had reached out to me about grabbing food. They wanted to go one place. I wanted to go someplace else. And needless to say, we ended up not meeting.
See you later.
Because they went where they were going. I went where I was going to go, and we all had a good night at our various places. Yet, in that, it wasn't about being difficult. It wasn't about compromising or any of that. It was just simply about, I know what I had a taste for. I know what I wanted. And in turn, in the definitive nature of who I am, that's what I went to do. Now, am I saying that I'm a tyrant and that, I can't be flexible? No. Because the harsh reality in life is that there are those times that you have to pivot. There's those times in life that you have to compromise. There are those times that you have to meet other folks in the middle. There are those times that you even have to give up your vantage point and position and perspective in order to please, suit, and align with other people. And I'm willing to do all of that. Yet, at the forefront of who I am typically going to just straight up be very definitive, very matter of fact, very black and white, seeing very little to no gray. And it is what it is. And that's just a part of who I am that I'm unapologetic about. And I've found as a consultant, it has significantly helped my career to be able to know that once a decision is made and we as a team conclude that this is how we're going to move forward, that we do that and we follow that plan from an A to Z perspective with every I dotted, every T crossed, and certainly have a significant success rate in following plans in that regard.
I like that. But let me ask you this. With you being wired that way, and I've known you for years, so I know you're wired that way. And like you said earlier in our conversation, just talking amongst the three of us, if anybody asks anybody about you, it's going to be consistent across the board. But for those that are not wired that way or struggle in those areas, what would you say needs to be done from a mindset perspective or just a self perspective to be able to be definitive in their decision making or definitive in their responses to questions? Is there something that can be done to work towards being able to be definite?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And even, it's funny, even when people ask me questions, I immediately have a definitive answer. So it's like, as you were even asking that question, I wasn't going back and forth in my mind and say, hey, what should I say? Like, the answer that immediately came to mind for me is that person has to want to be definitive. That's where it starts. Okay. Like, there has to be a desire that this is what you want to do. And then once you have that desire that this is what you want to do, then you have to decide that you're going to do it. And it's really just that simple. So it's having that desire to want to do it. So therefore, there's that acknowledgement. I'd like to be more definitive and definite in the things that I do. Okay, great, wonderful. Now, in doing that, you have identified an opportunity for something that you want to work on. And it may not necessarily even need to be defined as a improvement or an enhancement, because it may very well not be who you are. And if it's not who you are, it's fine. Be authentic to you. Mm-hmm. But if it's something you want to do, then you go on to that next level in making the decision that I'm going to do it. And then that's where having a conversation with somebody like me would come in quite handy. It's just saying, hey, this is how I do it. Here's what works for me. And a large part of that has to do with, you have to be critical in what you're doing. Like, you have to be able to think things through when you're definitive. You can't just be out here making decisions for the sake of making decisions and saying, hey, this is my definitive, definite way I'm going to move forward, without being able to process what it is that you're doing.
Gotcha. Okay. I like that.
Absolutely. And I can tell you it works just as well in my social life as it does in my corporate and professional life. And that's what I love about many of the topics that we've had thus far, is that it's such transferable information that we can use in all of our life, in all of our existence. And it doesn't even necessarily follow any age, young, old, in between, wherever you are. The information that we're sharing is applicable to every and anyone who desires to, in any way, shape, form, or fashion, entertain and consume the information that we're putting out there.
Stuff. And you take the guesswork out of it as well. With the realness and the authenticity of it, it takes all the guesswork out, where you can easily apply, if you have the desire, like you said, which is very simplistic, but very powerful. Like, you have to have the will and desire to want to change before any change is going to take place.
You think about it this way, Theo, it's being definite and direct and to the point and point blank is at the core of what this Authentic Realness podcast is about. So in turn, having this conversation is very timely, because it goes back to, in the first episode, I talked about how I would continue to talk about why this name. And if you think about all of the episodes that we broadcasted thus far, and this is for all the listeners, and we definitely thank those of you who are following us diligently, those of you that send me messages and are constantly saying, hey, Plush, thank you for the information. I really appreciate you. Continue to do more of that. I would encourage those of you that are doing these messages in private, though, that you can start doing them on public platforms, that it's okay for you to make these same comments to me publicly on Facebook or on LinkedIn or on any of the podcasts. But in that, where I'm going is, at the core of this Authentic Realness podcast, the presentation is always going to be a definitive presentation and delivery. You will never leave any of these sessions wondering, oh, I wonder what Plush thinks. That's just not what's going to happen. That every one of these episodes, I assure you that you will leave knowing with complete crystal clarity what my perspective is on the topic that we're discussing at the time. Now, whether you agree or disagree, that's up for debate. But the bottom line is that you will definitely leave knowing what my take is, what position I have, what perspective I have. And that's how I live my life. And I've found that way of living certainly allows me to sleep very well at night, because I don't ever have to wonder if I didn't say something to somebody, or shoulda, coulda, woulda. That's not how I live my life.
I also want to add something.
Go ahead, Fabi.
Yeah, I was just going to add that I think it's important to also surround yourself with people who are definitive. I feel like that will rub off on you as well. So for instance, as I know I talked a little bit about my sister, she's very definitive and confident in any decision. Like, what she says goes, and that's it. And I feel like from an Aaron perspective, when you became my mentor a couple years back, that's an area that I also struggled with. Even, for example, when I was interested in a career opportunity, and I was very on the fence. Even though I knew the decision I wanted to make, I wasn't definitive, and I wanted to gather other people's feedback. And you stopped me right then and there. And I remember you were like, whatever decision you want, like you need to make and not value the opinions of others. So I do think it's important to ensure that you surround yourself with people who are definitive in their answers, because if you surround yourself with a bunch of people who are not confident or don't really care, that's how you're just going to be. Versus if you surround yourself with people who are crystal clear in what they want, you know, what they say is how they feel, that will in turn rub off on you. And I feel like that will make you also confident enough to stand in your decisions.
And ensure that those people are sound counsel, ensuring in our circle that these people are God-fearing, Bible-believing folks who know the power of prayer. Because certainly, Fabi, you know firsthand as mentor, there's nothing that I'm going to say or do and advise or recommend that I don't say, hey, pray about it and be very clear on what God is saying to you. Now, you can take what I am saying as perspective, but whatever it is that God concludes for you, that's definitely what you want to rock and roll with. And for me, I'll tell you, many a times when I'm talking, I'm praying that as I'm talking to God at the same time. And certainly that takes time to do because you're talking, but your mind is focused on the Lord, saying, hey, God, give me the words of what I should say in this moment, because we do have to be very careful, particularly when you're definitive and very definite in what you're saying, that you want to be producing and giving and building and growing life. You don't want to be pulling people down and tearing them down and making them feel horrible. That it has to be, it can be sharp, it can be direct, it can be point blank, but it still yet can be loving in that same breath. And that's a skill. And that's something that definitely takes time to develop, and it comes over time. Theo, you were going to say something as you and Fabi were so zealous to talk at the same time. So my talk during the beginning worked. Look at you, God. I love it. Go ahead.
No, it's just so much stuff that's being laid out on the table. It's like a feast right now. Okay. And it's very important to really rub shoulders with the persons that you admire in that area. You know, one thing I can say is I know we've had a conversation a few weeks back before an episode, and I was talking to you about shopping, and we was talking about pants, and you was like, Theo, don't buy them pants. Black men don't look right in them pants.
Correct. It's not gonna work. Not happening.
Like, even with that conversation, you gave me a definite but sure answer. Then you gave me the background of why you gave me that answer. Yeah. Which is very important because there's a lot of times,
it was factual.
Very much. It definitely was. Because, you know, a lot of people would be like, no, it's not going to work, but then they can't tell you why.
Yeah.
So the fact that a person can say X, Y, Z and then give you the reasoning behind it, I feel like that's important as well, because a lot of times you can give a definite response or you can make a definite decision, but you know, what's the why in it as well? And I think that goes back to what I kind of touched on when we first started talking of what happened to cause a person to not be able to give a definite answer, or what happened for a person to be wired to be definite. You know, there may be a genie from birth. You know, everybody don't have the Wakanda purple juice running through them like Plush. Because I wasn't born wired like that. But, you know, it's very important to not just get on a tangent of being able to be deaf and be like, no, yes, and be just straightforward with that. But have an understanding of why you're giving the answer you're giving, or why you're making the decision you're making. And it could be something as simple as, like you said, this is what you want to eat, this is what you're going to eat. Point blank, period. But that's the why in it. You know what I mean? So,
and also just knowing that it's so important to ensure that you have substance with what you're doing and saying at all times. And that's one of those non-negotiables, that you just can't be in a situation where you do not look at the overall substance of what you're saying. Just not something that you want to do. And unfortunately, a lot of times, that's what people do. that they go through these situations where, okay, I've made a decision that I'm a little less definite than I'd like to be. So I'm now deciding that, yes, this is something I want to correct. And I'm deciding now that I am going to be more definite. But don't just do that for the sake of just doing it and not being critical in your definitiveness, because ultimately now you're putting yourself in a situation where you're no longer being authentically who you are. So now you're becoming somebody that you're not. And then that comes off as being fake and phony, because that's what it is. And then it may position you in a place where you're in a worse situation than you were in when you were indecisive and weren't as definitive. So we have to be very careful when we call ourselves, quote unquote, wanting to improve. Let's make sure we're improving holistically, and we're improving in a way that is relevant to us. Don't do it because, oh, I admire Theo and how definitive he is, but that may very well just not be who Aaron is. And if that is the case, it's totally okay. What I do want to do as we shift this session, though, back to the topic at hand that really drove this, which was that LinkedIn post. And I want to dive in deeper and even have the both of you to chime in as to exactly what I was talking about. So when I said, once I decide it's done, that's one of those ones where, as I alluded to, it came from a work situation where when I'm working with clients and we go through the process of a consultation and we come to terms of this is what we're doing. And then once we decide I'm done, that means that we're going to get it done. Like we get to that point where we agree that, hey, this is what we need to do. This is our problem. This is what we're trying to fix. This is how we're going to do it. Now we're going to rock and roll. We're going to create that action plan. We're going to dot every I. We're going to cross every T. And we are going to take this from concept to fruition. And we're going to do it in a way that is meaningful. It's seamless. It's an interesting journey. And it's one where we can conclude at the beginning that we've decided it's now done and it's going to get done in the way that we want it to get done. And that goes back to what you all were alluding to, that it does take a level of confidence to be able to do that. I tell you, one of the things that was funny when I first launched my consulting firm many years ago, when I was focusing just on professional planning, and that was everything from meeting planning to wedding planning, et cetera. And one of the things I built into my company at that time was I had 100% guarantee for my clients, even for weddings. Whereas if we agreed to something and everything that was in our contract, I was confident enough in my team and I and what we were going to do in our plans that if we did not do everything that we said that we were going to do for the client, every dime that they paid to us, we would give it back to them. And in many years of doing that and many clients, I never had to do that. And that's just because I created a system that was so detailed that I never had to worry about that. And that's where the confirming now in this phase of consulting that I'm doing, I'm able to say with complete confidence that once we decide, it's done. And it's going to be done in the exact way that we placed it in the action plan before we do it. So it goes back to connecting that success happens in the mind first. It goes back to that whole mindset of positivity. It goes back to being spectacular as always. So what I'm doing is I'm building this thread for you all to understand. This is not random in any way. That the elevated mindset that we talked about in a previous episode, it's important. It's a must. And if you want subpar, you're going to get subpar. If you want spectacular, excellent, and amazing, that's what you're going to get as well. So I conclude on this definitiveness, definite episode, before I allow both Fabi and Theo to give their closing thoughts, that for me in my house, when I say that I'm doing something, when I say I'm definite on it, it's done. And it's done with the spirit of excellence, and it's going to be spectacular.
For me, it's to come back with a closing statement. I would just go back to the desire of it all. You know, we all have various walks of life we came from, but you have to have the desire, whether it's work-wise, whether it's personal-wise. You have to have a desire to be definite in whatever you put your mind to, definite in whatever you're chasing. Once you have the will and desire intact, everything else will fall into place. And as I told Plush and Fabi before we even got to this place of recording, this is something that actually helps me in a lot of ways when it comes to work, because there are some areas within work now that I've been promoted where I'm not confident in doing certain things. But I have to keep in mind, you have the desire to be where you are. You have the desire to be able to go into these boardrooms and be like, hey, this is what it is. This is what it's not. Let's get it done. Let's execute it this way. And this is why we're going to execute it this way, so that we can give a definite product and a hardline product that our consumers will love. So this helped me a lot.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
And you're going to be successful in your mind. And that session of itself is helping you along, brother, in what you're doing in the corporate space and what you're doing in every aspect of your life.
Most definitely.
So picking back off Theo, I totally agree that, and Aaron, I know you mentioned it also, it does really start with your mind, finding that confidence in yourself, but also training your mind and affirming yourself that you are confident and capable and more than able to make the decisions for yourself and to stand by them. So it really does all start with your mind. And then once you get your mind right, you just will build upon that confidence. And I think that's important to start, honestly, from as young as possible, but it's never too old to change your mindset and just apply these, kind of going forward in life.
Absolutely. And certainly because we try to keep these episodes within a timely manner and definitely always want to keep them less than an hour, ideally around the 45-minute mark. There are a couple of things that I told Theo I wanted to talk about very quickly before we ended tonight's session. And as you all can see, Theo just constantly throwing in his Wakanda and Black Panther connections to this whole conversation. So certainly, Theo, we hear you loud and clear, brother, because it's such an excellent spirit to be able to watch the second movie and know that there's no need to do any comparisons, that they both are amazing and wonderful in their own right. And certainly thanking God for allowing both of those films to be made in our lifetime for us to be able to really take heed and know that they're universal films and they're for everyone, for every walk of life, that there's something that you can get from it. I always reflect on how amazing and wonderful God is to me, though, and certainly for people who know me, they know that I knew Chad personally. When I moved to New York, Chad and I went to church together at the Mount Lebanon Baptist Church in Brooklyn, in Bed-Stuy. And to have known Chad from a struggling actor, and believe it or not, he and I actually had the conversations that he wanted to do some type superhero film. He didn't call it by name as to Black Panther, but he definitely knew that it would be something significant. And I can tell you all, to have known him personally, it certainly was really uplifting, and it still is to me, as to a part of the reason why I know that there's anything that if I put my mind to it, it can be done. I use his life as an example of that. For that to have been someone that I knew personally, to see his journey, to see the things that we talked about. And I'm not talking about group settings. I'm talking about things that Chad and I talked about one-on-one. to be able to see those things happen. And again, when I knew him, he was a struggling actor.
Because he came out of nowhere and
He
was hitting
came,
it back to back
and he was.
to back
He
to
was.
back.
Correct. And we had the South Carolina connection, because that's what I think really had us to gravitate, is that you have these two dudes from South Carolina who are here in the big city doing big city things, or attempting to, and certainly had a path that God so ordained it that our lives would cross at that particular juncture of life. And certainly I'm thankful for that, and to know that we both were able to have various impacts on each other's lives. So just keep on throwing in your Black Panther moments, Theo, because I have to smile each time that you do that. The other thing is, I just wanted to update Theo's comment on the previous episode. We talked about the emergency row being the most comfortable seats on the plane. No, it's first class.
Hold up. Got him!
However, I'll give you that. Just wanted to be crystal clear that we're always presenting authentic realness in these parts. How about that, sir?
I take that.
Okay. Just so you know. And the fact of the matter that you get drinks in first class, you get whatever you want, you get on first, you get off first. Like, let me tell you, it's nothing like it. But
You're
I'll
right
leave
about
it.
that.
There's nothing like it. And then with that, I'll move into our closing prayer. Heavenly Father God, we come before you yet again, just thanking you, God, for who you are. God, we thank you for health, life, and strength, and all the amazing and wonderful things that you constantly allow to have in our lives, God. God, we thank you for
Realness.
Thanksgiving of 2022. My heart is full to know that so many friends and family members and various people appear to really have great Thanksgivings this year. That there seem to be more convening and communing of families getting together, as it appears that we are slowly moving away from the times of COVID. Certainly we know it's still ever present, and we want to continue to keep ourselves safe and doing all the things that we need to do to not have COVID and not to have the flu. But certainly, God, thank you for allowing us to get together with our families, to have some celebration, to have some joy, to have an opportunity to thank you for all that you're constantly doing in our lives. And God, just to have a moment of just to be. Because so often we're in the hustle and bustle of life that we don't just have those moments where we just sit still and allow us to be in your presence and just to bask in the greatness and the excellence of who you are. God, I'd ask that you continue to allow this podcast to be a blessing to people, that certainly we are in our grooves, and we would just ask, God, that you will expand our territory, that you would allow us to have an impact on lives in a way that we don't even know that we're impacting. God, that you would allow us to have the humility and humbleness that is necessary to be beacons of light of you in this dark world that we're in. God, I'd ask that you continue to cover Fabby's family, Theo's family, my family, and all of the families that are associated, connected to this podcast in some way or another. God, we have some exciting things coming up, that you continue to birth things in us, that we have our authentic realness experts that are coming very soon, that we have all kinds of amazing people that you are allowing to be our guests that are coming, that you would prepare their hearts and minds in advance, God, that they might align to this vision is what we're asking for. And then, God, we just want to say thank you. Just thank you, God, for being you. So, God, we love you. We adore you. We magnify you. And it's in the glorious and magnificent name of your Son, Jesus, God, that we pray. Amen.
Amen.
All right, my friends, this has been yet another episode that I've enjoyed, and I pray that people will receive it in the way that it was presented. I also want to remind all of our listeners that we appreciate your support, and I cannot echo that enough. So people like Plush, we're tired of you thanking us. Consider this one of the few Southern things about me, But as a Southerner, we are taught from day one that anything that anyone does for you, that's not something they have to do. So you always want to present gratitude and appreciation and thankfulness for things that people are doing. And I certainly want to thank all of you for listening, because I certainly know there's so many other things that we have competing for our time. I want to remind you all that the greatest part of this Authentic Realness podcast, ARP, is each and every one of you. And until next time, let us all make it spectacular.